I'm here in Venice, home of Bellini, Giorgione, Tintoretto, Veronese, and of course, the magical Titian. These Venetian masters created some of the greatest painting the world has ever seen. Titian is the greatest of all the Venetian painters, but he didn't actually come from Venice at all. He came from a town called Cadore in the Dolomites, up in the mountains. His family were timber merchants. Titian arrived in Venice at the age of 12, showing a prodigal talent for drawing and painting, and he ended up settling in Cannaregio, which is in the north of the city, and had a view of his hometown across the lagoon. Surrounded by water and bathed in shimmering light, by the end of the 15th century, Venice had become the richest city in the whole of Europe, and inspired a vision of the world where beauty, pleasure, and the transient nature of life was celebrated through paint like nowhere else in the world. This is his studio and home where he worked for over 40 years. You can see his front door just there, and his studio here where he created some of his greatest masterpieces. Titian's big break came at the age of 27 when the Franciscan monks of the Friary Church commissioned him to paint the Assumption. I can imagine Titian walking around the church looking at the art in here and thinking, how is he going to make a mark on Venetian painting? And this is what he came up with, the Assumption behind me. The complicated composition of the figures and the design is just mind-blowing. No one had ever seen anything like this. Drawing the viewer's eye upwards through a soaring composition of dynamic figures and radiant light, creating a powerful sense of divine ascension that breaks through the boundaries of the painting and the church itself. This painting turned Titian into a superstar. I'm here in the Church of the Santa Maria della Salute, built to commemorate the end of the plague. And behind me is St. Mark enthroned, a prime example of Titian's mid-career style, heavily influenced by the early Venetian master, Giorgione. He learnt from Giorgione by absorbing his poetic approach to mood, atmosphere, and colour, transforming those lessons into a more dynamic, emotionally charged style that would surpass his master and redefine Venetian painting. Look at the ambitious perspective that Titian's going for in these paintings. They're incredible. When the city of Venice was founded, the people needed a patron saint to worship. So they went to Alexandria and got the body of St. Mark, wrapped him in pork so their Islamic counterparts couldn't touch or find the body, and sailed him back to Venice. Titian's portrayal of St. Mark reflects both spiritual reverence and civic pride. The saint was a powerful icon of Venice's divine favour and identity, embodying the city's grandeur and sacred destiny. Titian was a proud Venetian, not just its greatest painter, but a symbol of its cultural magnificence. The whole idea of the artist living beyond the norms of society in order to create genius works came from Titian, and he was best friend with the poet Aritino, and they lived the rock and roll, raucous, riotous life of two artists in Venice, wining and dining in Aretino's palazzo on the Grand Canal. Here's a plaque that the Venetians put up to commemorate the great poet himself. Aretino, the infamous satirist and self-proclaimed scourge of princes, used his sharp wit and powerful pen
to promote and protect Titian, helping to secure him prestigious commissions. Their bond was rooted in shared ambition and artistic daring. Both men, masters of their craft, both unafraid to challenge the conventions of their time, and both committed to the Renaissance ideal that art, whether in paint or prose, could wield real power.
From what I've read, their dinner parties on the Grand Canal were legendary at Aritino's house. They wined and dined guests and had music playing all night. You can see Aritino's palazzo from here.
From the 14th century, with the rediscovery of the geometry of the Greeks, you see a genuine intellectual shift in art. The desire to paint the world as it really is. Paintings with perspective and depth, and that was a change in human perspective. Titian is the genesis of this tradition, the founding father of this new art.
Titian was one of Lucian Freud's favourite painters, and he commented in an interview I once saw that Titian painted so many dogs in his painting. Once he said that, I started noticing all the dogs in Titian's paintings. Here's an example here.
He won prestigious commissions from emperors, kings, and popes, which established him as one of the most sought-after painters of his time.
You can find Titian paintings dotted all over the city of Venice. However, Titian became so popular in his lifetime that he found an international market.
King Charles V of Spain and his son, King Philip II, bought a vast amount of his work, including the Poesy masterpieces.
Behind me is one of 6 paintings commissioned by King Philip of Spain based on Ovid's Metamorphoses, arguably his most important commissions in his whole life. They had huge impact on the development of European art.
Unlike the cool idealism of earlier classical art, Titian's gods and mortals are flesh and blood, caught in moments of drama and vulnerability, rendered with luminous colour, dynamic movement, and daring sensuality. The Poesy were not simply mythological scenes, but profound meditations on human passion and divine indifference, a rich fusion of poetry and paint that elevated storytelling to a new emotional and psychological intensity.
No one at the time in European art was painting with such likeness. We're almost looking at an awakening of visual consciousness. You can see the influence that it had on Rembrandt, who painted this self-portrait 130 years later in exactly the same pose, almost trying to say, I am now, like the great Titian, the greatest painter in Europe. In his final years, Titian was really experimenting with paint. In the Death of Actaeon behind me, you can see figures and forms almost dissolve. If you look really closely, you can see a drip of paint that Titian's left on the canvas that really takes you inside the studio.
As his eyesight began to fail, his paintings grew looser, darker, and more emotionally charged. Yet his artistry deepened into something visionary. No longer concerned with the polished finish of classical perfection, he began to paint with his fingers, rags, and broad expressive strokes, creating hauntingly atmospheric works.
We're in the Jesuit church in Venice, which is a stone's throw away from where Titian lived and had his studio. This is the martyrdom of St. Lawrence and is an incredible example of Titian's late period. The Roman soldier is pushing the spear into St. Lawrence with so much pressure that Titian's actually painted it bending with its force. And look at the glow of the fire underneath St. Lawrence. This is almost a piece of religious cinema. The foreshortening of the torso is also incredibly difficult to paint. Titian is really showing what he can do and his genius.
In his late works, we glimpse the beginnings of Impressionism, centuries ahead of its time. Titian, half blind, painting not what he saw, but what he felt, with a power undimmed by age.
This is Titian's final painting, called the Pietà. You can see the sense that Titian felt his mortality creeping ever closer. Look at the figure of Jesus Christ. Titian was painting this for his own tomb. It was found in his studio when he died and completed by his studio assistant, Parma Giovanni. In 1576, a terrible plague swept through Venice, and at the age of 88, Titian died suddenly. The city of Venice decided to bury him here, next to his Assumption. Here's his tomb. Very shortly after Titian's death, his son, heir, and assistant, Orazio, also died of the plague, leaving no will. This greatly complicated the settlement of Titian's estate.
Titian's house was looted. Many of his possessions, including a number of his artworks, were stolen. Despite the chaos and loss, Titian's legacy endures. A towering figure in European art, his life and works are a testament to the power of creativity and human spirit. He is remembered as the king of painters.